Hey, everybody. Welcome to our Counterpoise podcast. I'm one of your co hosts, Samantha Adams, and I'm also joined here with my other two co hosts. Guys, want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, everybody. My name is Malik Foster, a co-host for the Counterpoise podcast.
And I'm Everett Stevenson, one of your other co-hosts as well as for Counterpoise Pod. And on today's weekly episode, we wanted to definitely talk about something that we feel like is a big topic that, we don't necessarily see a lot of people talking about. And it's something that, we think that deserves some looking into. We've all been young, we've all been growing, and this is also going to be a series that we're going to do, which we're titling Young Love. And where we're going to look into the differences between males and females at an early age, in the teen ages rather, and how they look at love. Maybe some of the things that they can learn from if they haven't necessarily learned certain things within their relationships or about relationships, some things that we could give advice about, as well as ways that people can maybe learn how to love and be loved, what to expect from, love, especially at a young age. So we wanted to kind of dive into that topic because we know we have a lot of young viewers, and there's some of the things that we looked at when we looked at looking at people who've made decisions early on in life based off of love and how those decisions could affect them, in the long term. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the topic today.
That's right. So, we're going to focus on the young ladies first, because ladies first, right? We're going to focus on that first. And then next week's topic is we're going to talk about the young men. So just to start off, a lot of times we see, as adults, we see women finding themselves in these types of situations where, relationship-wise, where, that maybe they haven't properly vetted a man, or, let's not say man, significant other, right? Or you find them in these situations that grown women probably shouldn't be finding themselves in. Maybe they should have found themselves more so in those situations when they were younger. Now, there's a lot of things that, you're just going to have to go through, you're going to have to experience, and people are just going to bump their heads. That's just the nature of the beast, right? But there's a lot of things I think that women can potentially avoid to a degree when getting into relationships at a young age. One of the biggest issues is that a lot of times women enter these relationships and they have on rose-colored glasses, right? They have the idea that these relationships are going to be, however picture perfect they've created in their mind, and it's never that, right? Because no person is perfect, so you can't have a perfect relationship when you're dealing with imperfect people. And so these rose-colored glasses, like they have these ideas that the relationship is going to be a particular way, or they think they can save a guy or fix a guy or whatever have you, and then skip off into the sunset. And a lot of that comes from, a lot of different things, whether it be, maybe there's no male figure at home. Maybe there's nobody talking to them about relationships. Maybe they've seen their mom continue to make the same mistakes and they're not getting the appropriate information. Maybe they're learning from their friends or social media or, and not really like listening to people who have actually had these experiences and have given them have imparted some sort of experience or wisdom on them so that they don't have to go through that, guys?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the things that came to mind for me in particular with this topic was looking at, some of the times where we've seen people or women in particular who've gotten into a lot of relationships, serious, maybe even got married at young ages, 19, 20, 18, and at a young age, and maybe that wasn't the best partner for them. Maybe they thought that the things that and I think this kind of goes, this is something that may be going into both people, but in particular, I think a lot of times with women, because I think a lot of times women kind of romanticize things a lot of times. So they may have looked at that relationship and thought it was going to be, a pretty good relationship, one that might stand the test of time, one that may, go the distance, and not really necessarily have a firm understanding about what all is needed in order for a relationship to continue to grow, as well as in order for the things that maybe their husband may necessarily need as they continue to go off in the world and maybe try to protect and provide for them. So what came to mind with me is like sometimes, like I said, when we have people who get married early on and somehow, some way, sometimes throughout the years, maybe in a few years or even less, in some cases, that relationship kind of deteriorates and then they don't, marry again, or they either, have a different outlook on, marriage or love in a sense because of, that first love that they may have had, or that first person that they thought was going to be their first love or main, serious love didn't work out, and it kind of scars, their outlook on marriage moving forward.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, young women today, a lot of women today, period, modern women, there's this whole thing about settling, right? They feel as though they should have it all without having to give up or sacrifice anything, and that, that they don't have to put in any work for a man. That basically, a man is just some sort of extra financial tool. That's kind of how they're looking at it. A lot of women today, instead of looking at it a different way, as in a man can offer other things besides that, because, as we shifted from a society where women primarily was nurturing at home into a war of the modern women, who a career woman, corporate women, things of that nature, where they're doing some of these white collar jobs and stuff like that, office work and stuff like that. We've seen that kind of mental shift where, they want to live a certain way and they see things a certain way. So where a lot of women, more women than I think should, are looking down upon an average, hardworking, blue collar man, saying, "Oh, that's not good enough for me because I'm able to have these opportunities now and make my own money that's at the same level as a man or even greater than some men." So they look at things through these rose-colored glasses, saying, "Hey, if I can do this, I deserve a man who's doing double what I'm doing or providing more than what I'm providing in the relationship." And that's what we tend to see here.
I have a little pushback on that, Malik. My pushback on that is that first and foremost, women were doing white collar type jobs before they were doing blue collar jobs. There were secretaries and things of that nature before they could go work in a warehouse or a factory. So I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it has more so to do with provision and comfort and what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, you can be friends with careers.
Let me make my point. and feeling comfortable and safe, right? And so if a woman is in a situation or circumstance or relationship or whatever the situation is, when she finds herself in that space, right, she's looking for someone to make her feel safe, to make her feel like he can provide for her, right? And it's not that she's not willing to provide anything, right? Because for a long time there was a lot of women out there giving away the whole cow and not getting nothing out of it, right? Being the whole cow, giving the milk away for free, rather, because the old adage, that says, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free? And so here it is, you have women finding themselves in these relationships with these men where young women, right, where they're doing everything. right? They're doing all the things of a spouse, but he has zero intention on marrying her, and that's what she ultimately wants. And then at some point he leaves her, and then she feels like, why did I give all that? So I think in part that comes from that, right? Like, you know, the giving of yourself, giving so much of yourself, and then walking away with nothing because his intent was never the same intent as yours. And learning from a young age that, you know, from those experiences that you have at a young age, probably shouldn't be doing that until you get married, right? And so I think that there's a balance that's missing, you know, with these young ladies, because number one, you're given the advice, you know, don't give away. Why give them milk? I mean, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free, right? When they're normally just talking about sex. But it's also too everything else, right? But at the same time, a lot of modern women don't even know how to do certain things that traditional women typically do, like cook. Like, you should know how to cook because that's how you feed yourself. You know what I'm saying? It's one thing if you don't want to cook, it's something else when you don't know how. Or, you know, you're not into cleaning. Like, you should, all cleanliness is next to godliness. You should keep your house clean, things like that. You know what I mean? And I can understand you not wanting to go to your man's house and do all of those things for him if that's what you so choose, because you're not married and you're like, okay, if we're married, then I'll do those things because that's what a wife does. But it's something else when you just don't know how to do it. You don't have the ability. And I think that in part is part of the issue that you're talking about, Malik.
Well, I wanted to jump in here too, because I think you guys brought up two very distinctive things. And I'm going to start with what Malik was referring to earlier within, you know, the older days and times and how things were. I think at that point in time, you know, we have to also keep in mind that a lot of times women's stability was tied into being with a man. You know what I'm saying? So and they wanted them at a young, fertile age. So, you know, getting married early on at that time allowed for women to feel like they have what Sam was referring to again was the stability of having maybe a provider or having someone who has resources who could possibly fend for a family. But I think when we look at to sum up to what Sam is talking about now, when we look at the situation nowadays in the modern day, you know, I think we see a lot of women, some women push that off. Now, and that kind of goes hand in hand. I think women who are more career minded, women who are more driven by a desire to have financial stability, independent, like their own financial stability, are more likely to hold off on, you know what I'm saying, getting married early on until they feel like they have themselves in that position to take care of themselves, and then they'll look for someone else in an event that, you know, whatever they choose not to. And I think we see that sometimes where, you know, there's stories of women that, like, you know, go to even like graduate schools and get graduate degrees solely for the intentions of having meeting a spouse. I believe I had an old boss of mine who actually met her husband while she was in law school. And although she still continued to work, she didn't necessarily have to, but you know what I'm saying? She continued to work. And it wasn't necessarily that she said that she was per se looking for her husband when she got to law school. But then there are other women who say like they do go to graduate schools. They do go to other, like, you know, or even just regular college with the intent of finding a husband, at the intent of, you know, they're going to get an education, but they also want to find somebody who they believe will be able to be a provider for them in the future. So I think that's a factor that we have to look in today's society as well, you know. But for the other women who are more so driven by the emotion, if you will, because that's what I think is more so like the butterflies that they feel when they're around a certain guy. The, you know, that heart racing or whatever feeling that y'all might have, I don't know, whenever you guys are around the guy that you like or whatnot. The women that are driven a little bit more by that, I think, are more willing to try to want to have, that marriage early on in their lives, and they look to, be with that person, even though they may not necessarily have a stronger understanding on what all is needed in order for a relationship to thrive. So, like I said, it's a sticky situation, but I definitely think that it's one that can be solved with, one, us being able to have more conversations, two, with, young ladies being a little bit firm, understanding what they want, and then also understanding what it is. Because I think, Sam, you made up a good point as far as saying, like, well, why, buy the cow, or excuse me, when you can have the milk for free. And that's a great point. But I also think that you have to consider the opposing side to that is, why buy a car that you haven't test drive? You know what I'm saying? And what that is kind of inferring is, on the opposite side is, I'm not going to go buy a car just based off its looks. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to want to see how it bends the curves. I want to see if the engine is stalling out, or if, you know what I'm saying, if the car even runs, you know what I'm saying, to my liking, rather. So those are things that I think that both parties, like, when it comes to looking at what people are going to get out of the relationship, there does need to be a give and take on that. But I also think that sometimes when women are a little bit younger, they're not necessarily fully equipped to understand exactly what all they're going to need out of those relationships. So in some senses, and I think nowadays in the modern day world, they're more susceptible to falling lure to guys who can provide certain things for them that they want in the now. So, like, case and example, I live in an area where you may see older men who may be, let's say, older, let's like 50 plus, 40 plus, I ain't gonna say 40 even, like 50.
Oh no, it could be in their 40s if she's like 19.
Well, I don't think 40 is old. That's the only reason why I'm 30 something.
It's not old. It's not.
But okay, but maybe 40 something dating a 19, 20-year-old may look a little funnier. So I'll put 40 in that age if you're dating someone in your 20s. But 50 is 60 and you're dating someone in their 20s or teens. Like, that young lady might be excited because she gets to fly around, go places that she may not have been able to go. She gets to, enjoy nice things, maybe eat at nice restaurants, maybe wear nice clothing, do those things that she maybe wants to, and enjoy boat rides, helicopter rides, private jet, however that person's living, and enjoy those type of benefits. But not necessarily, and not necessarily even be required to do some of the things that, as Malik was referring to, that traditionally guys who are working the 9 to 5, guys who's trying to build themselves up, will be looking for a spouse to do, right? Because that guy, he's on his come up. He's looking to try to get himself going. Whereas if you got a guy that's already there, I don't need you to cook and clean. I just need you to come in here and provide the vibes, if you will. You know what I'm saying? I want you. And so I think sometimes women may fall lured to that, but and kind of go on that route, even though, unfortunately, that might not lead to a lasting relationship. You know what I'm saying? That just might lead to a short-term, temporary fun. But some people are willing to allow themselves to have that, just to have certain experiences, as opposed to doing, working on a more traditional relationship that's going to require more time, effort, work by both parties.
But I think that leads to a certain level of manipulation, though, right? Because when you have a younger girl, I'm not call her a child, but a younger girl or younger woman dealing with an older man or an older gentleman, right? Well, an older man, right? If he's over here selling her dreams, she's buying them because she's young, right? She's buying them because in her mind, she doesn't have anything to gauge it up against. And that's something that's lacking, right? Like when you're talking about the things that have been provided and the things that are lacking to find yourself in these spaces, like don't get me wrong, some relationships with those age gaps do in fact work, right? But there's a level of manipulation there if you're talking about the circumstance that you're talking about when you're saying, like, let's say, for example, that older man wants to have fun. He's selling that dream to that girl that, all right, this is the thing that I'm trying to do. Like, I want you to be my girl. I want to marry you one day, blah, 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 have my kids, whatever he's saying to her, or whatever it is that he's saying to get her to do the things that he wants her to do. She's doing them because she is still impressionable. Right. And so when you're talking about the things that are lacking versus the things that are being provided, that's kind of what I was touching on earlier, right? Where some of these girls have people in their lives that are able to say, hey, listen, that ain't it. There's something wrong with this situation. Something is amiss. Like you should not be finding yourself in these types of situations with these types of people, right? Or they have a father figure, because some of these young ladies find themselves in the situation that you're referring to with older gentlemen, because why? They don't have a father, so they're really looking for a dad, right? That's really what it ultimately is. They don't know that that's what they're looking for. And another thing is, I don't remember if it was you or Malik that said it, is them knowing what they want. At a young age, you don't know what you want. You have no idea because you have nothing to gauge it up to because you're still trying to learn who you are, right? You just know that you like this person and you want to be around them, period. You don't know that you don't like when people do X, or you don't know that you can't stand, or that you love even when people treat you a different type of way. Like you don't know what it is and how you thrive because you're young and you have nothing to bounce it off or gauge it up against, right? So hold on, I'm almost done. So, in part, a lot of that comes from getting the proper guidance, right? When you have younger ladies who been given the proper guidance, it's easier for them to figure out what they want, what they don't want. But when you have young ladies that don't have the proper guidance, it's easier to fall victim to things to being taken advantage of.
And I just want to push back on that because I think no, I'm going to argue no, because I think that like as a young lady, you kind of know where guys your age are at, and this is why I say that. You'll understand that a guy that's like, say, 17, 18, right? He might be only able to take you to the movies, maybe a little, dinner date, possibly something like that. He can't maybe necessarily do trips or da-da-da-da, but you got a college guy. You know what I'm saying? He could take you on to, frat parties, or he can put you on a college campus, right? So now you feel more older. You feel like you're doing more grown things. And the boy who only want to take you bowling, you're looking at him like, why would I want to go bowling when I could be at a frat party over here? Or I could be, on campus partying here. Like, and that's why I say I don't want to play it too much on a manipulation tip of saying like that they're just so naive. I think that it's also understanding that what's being presented to them is just such greater than what's being presented by people that's their age, that some young ladies would be more willing to say, you know what, let me go ahead and go that route because I think that has something a little bit better for me, as opposed to, the kid up the street who works, at maybe AMC or works, as a paper boy or whatever the case may be. And he's a little bit more limited on the things that he's offering. He might have more genuine feelings for you. He may have a stronger desire for you, but he doesn't have the means to maybe be able to provide you access to things that you normally would want. Because you know how that goes. A guy who could probably put you on a college campus and he drives versus the kid who just got his driver's license but no car, you know what I mean? That's going.
I agree to that to an extent, but also too, we have to keep in mind that young ladies mature faster than young men. So when you're talking about people in the same age bracket, yeah, when you're talking about provision wise, you're right. But when you're talking about maturity wise, we're talking about two totally different things. And that also plays a huge factor, right? Like if you okay, little Billy wants to take Sarah out and he wants to take her bowling, right? But then you got Michael who wants to take her to a college party or to a party, a frat party or whatever. Michael's a little older, so she can meet him in a different mental space than she can with little Billy, because Billy, although he might have more meager means, mentally he may not be there, not the way that she's trying to connect. And that right there is also what I'm saying. When you're talking about manipulation, it doesn't mean that everybody in that space is trying to manipulate, the young lady. It's just that it at some point, in some instances, it's easier to manipulate her, right? Because she is, although she may be more mature than Billy, she's not as mature as Michael. And Michael can probably capitalize off of that.
Well, I'm going to agree with Sam a little bit here. I think I wouldn't use the word manipulation, although, I think that's true. If a person is younger, more inexperienced, in general, of course, they're going to be more susceptible to manipulation. But I will say, from a man's perspective, it's definitely easier for to get a younger woman on your program on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do things, and it's easier for you to have that control and how you want your relationship to go, as opposed to if you decide to be in a relationship with an older lady. It's going to be difficult. She's had all these experiences. She's more set in stone and like laser focused on the things that she wants. Her standards might be even higher, and a lot of certain things might not impress her. So you're going to have to meet that certain standard or go beyond it to impress her, as opposed to a younger woman will be impressed with some of the more simple things that you're doing and the consistency in which you're doing it, as opposed to an older lady. It's more of an expectation of certain things that you're supposed to be doing. So I think that's there. But as far as the young ladies going in terms of their maturity and stuff, I think you said something very important. You said, Sam, you said that the young girls don't know what they want. I agree, but also disagree, because I think most of those young women know they want to be married. Like, they know their goals and what they want, but they may not know themselves the best. They're still growing, just like every young person, and just like every person, no matter the age, still growing, still learning. And they may not be as experienced and wise in certain things, but at the end of the day, most ladies know if they want to be married or not, right?
Yeah,
They know that.
They may know the goal, they may not know what they want in a mate, though, is what I'm referring to.
Well, they know the basics. Most women know the basics. They need the providing, they need the protecting, they need those resources.
A lot of times but I'm talking about as far as compatibility, personality, things like that. You can't possibly know whether or not you want somebody that problem solves that. Like, okay, let's say y'all have a disagreement. You have two people that are in a relationship and they have a disagreement. If you don't know how to give a man space and that's what he needs, some people want to confront a problem straight out. Some people need time to go think about it and figure out how to handle it, things like that. If you are the type that wants him to handle it straight out and he's not that type of person, that is going to be a problem. That's going to create more problems than it solves, right? And you have to be able to know that about you, and you have to be able to know that about him, and whether or not that's the type of person that you want to deal with when you're in that type of situation. And that's the kind of thing that I'm referring to. That's just an example. Like, you have to know the personality type of the person, the mate that you choose. Otherwise, you're going to continue to run into problems. If you want somebody that's not going to sit there and go back and forth with you and argue, or do you want somebody that's going to want to go argue with you? You know what I'm saying? Do you want that type of smoke? To each his own. But at the end of the day, if you can't appreciate who it is that you're dealing with or what it is that you want from an individual, because you don't know yourself, you're going to continually find yourself in a situation where you're backing these young men or grown men or whoever, older men, whatever, into certain types of corners because you're expecting somebody to be A when in fact they're B, or vice versa.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say that goes to the point of I think upbringing and experience. Like if you have the proper upbringing, like preferably two-parent home or a very strong parent who's able to teach you some of these things, like preparing you to be a wife or preparing you to be in a relationship, that can also help with the learning curve on what you need to do, right? I think that's what you're trying to talk, what you're really mainly discussing. Like a lot of women know they want to be married, but they don't know what to do necessarily in the relationships, which I completely agree. And I think that goes towards the upbringing. And that's due, well, in our community, that's due to a lot of the single parent households coming about. So, the male and female relationship in our community is very fractured. I think it's fractured across the whole country, but in our, we got it the worst, I would say, if you want to look at the marital statistics and stuff like that. So that's something we definitely need to work on and improve our relationships amongst each other as far as males and females goes. You want to jump in here, E?
Certainly. One of the things that I was thinking that you guys had kind of brought up was, the mindset, like the grooming, if you will, to become a wife, or in particular, since this is what we're discussing. And I think one of the things that I would advise to women, young women who maybe are looking to try to find a guy who is husband material. I think a lot of times, you may find, and this isn't necessarily just something that's dedicated to young women, but this could be women of all ages. Like, I think a lot of times, we find that you have an idea of the type of guy that you want, but you may not necessarily have an idea of the type of guy that you need. And some women will be like, no, I know what I want and need. but do you know what that man needs in order to be what you need him to be? And I think that's a factor that we need to put on the table a lot of times. And that goes with the grooming, if you will, of, helping young women to understand, like you made a great example of, Sam, earlier. Do you understand your communication styles? Do you understand how to effectively communicate with someone without maybe tearing them down? Do you understand how to, uplift and encourage? Do you understand that you have a power that can allow a man to be as great as, he could, his destined, that he is destined to become, by speaking life into him? Or are you kind of, nitpicking and tearing things down to try to, kind of limit them in a sense? Are you putting certain things on them that you may be feeling that may be holding you guys back? So I think those are all factors that go into it. But I think some of those things can be neutralized by, having the right type of people around you. And I think, unfortunately, we've seen, like, there's a TikTok video going around where a guy asking women, like, hey, do you want to be married? Do you want to be married? And most of the women were younger women, we would say. And like, a lot of women were just like, no, I'm not interested in marriage. I'm not interested in marriage. And the thing that kind of like that the thing that, like, I think having that mentality, what that does is, unfortunately, it plays into the favor of the guy. Because now, if I know that I don't necessarily have to treat you like you're going to potentially be a wife, I don't have to treat you because you feel like whatever, I'm good. I'm playing the game just like a guy is. I want to get out here and just have my fun and do what I want to do. You know what I'm saying? You're not willing to commit towards that you're not willing to have that commitment that you necessarily need to have in order for you guys to go down the road. And I feel like, if you have somebody to teach you and tell you, like, hey, hey, this is what this is going to look like down the road. You're going to need to be able to make room for a person to grow. You're going to need to be able to make room for you to allow them to have their space with themselves and their friends. You need to be able to have, you know what I'm saying, space for you to have your own time and away from your family and your, you know, with your friends and with yourself even, so that you can continue to have that peace. That you need to be able to chill out. Because sometimes I think, like, especially being young, person might feel like, oh, I want to spend every moment with you. Oh, you don't want to be with me right now? You know what I'm saying? You want to go hang out with your boys? Like, why you always want to go play basketball with them? Like, why can't I come and cheer? Or why can't I, like, you know, no, like, you got to be able to give and take and give that space. And I think some of that comes with that mentorship. And to the point that Malik made, you know, unfortunately, we might not necessarily have a lot of examples of those in the relationship. And even some of the relationships who may have, husband or women who may have husbands, they may be husbands by title, but, you know, not necessarily by action. And what I mean by that is that, you know, you might see a guy who, you know, they always say this thing, happy wife, happy life, but like, you might see a guy who may be married, but he don't make no decisions. You know what I'm saying? Whatever he got to do, he got to run it through his wife. And I'm not saying that as far as having a conversation and then you guys discuss things. I'm talking about she feels like she makes all the decisions. She feels like she plans all of the trips. She feels like she does whatever, you know what I mean? So everything, she's still kind of in that masculine energy because she does everything and all, but she just has a husband entitled because, okay, yeah, y'all married, but he's not leading. He's not necessarily like making decisions so that she can fall back and rest in her femininity. He's not doing none of those things that allow her to just fall back sometimes and to be able to just be comfortable and trust. So you may have people who grew up in those type of environments, and the women that's in those environments may, you know, unfortunately see, oh, well, you know, a man is almost like a rag doll. You know what I'm saying? He's here as a proxy, if you will, per se. He's just here so that I can show people, yes, I have somebody, you know what I'm saying, in my life. I have somebody in my life, but I still run everything. And that's not a real relationship in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? I think that's a situation where, you know, somebody just has, like you said, a proxy mate. They don't necessarily have a real spouse. They don't necessarily have someone that they can look to or lead. And I think you can see that because of the way that they may treat that person, as opposed just juxtaposed to a real relationship where you may see each other both having those conversations, having those tough decisions, working on things, going to marriage counseling, doing the things that they may need to be doing, going to personal counseling if need be, doing the things that they need to be doing to try to become a better person for themselves as well as their family. You know, a lot of times we don't necessarily see those grand examples of that. But I think, you know, what we can look towards is individuals who do have those. And sometimes you can find that within a religious background, as far as going to a church or, you know, maybe seeking, you know, marital counseling there. Again, like you said, maybe seeing a therapist or something like that, maybe seeking advice from an individual at that point. As well as, you know, you maybe can look towards organizations. I know we talked about this too. You as far as our communities, we know you have the Divine Nine. You can maybe find, or I don't necessarily know how many sororities there is in that, but you can definitely look to some of the women that's in those groups. A lot of times you can find women that maybe have, I think, like in one of the areas that I was growing up in, they had like a cotillion. So you had, like, you know, young debutantes. You can have women grow up in those in those type of environments as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say one thing that we didn't really talk about is the media, right? And the media's effect on these young ladies and their rose-colored glasses and how it affects expectations going down the road, right? Like if you look at something as simple as Cinderella or Snow White or any of those Disney fairy tales of old, not necessarily the more recent ones, but most of the ones of old, where you have a young lady who's a damsel in distress and somebody comes to save her, and then he saves her, and then they get to live happily ever after. That is the story. That is the end of every story told. Matter of fact, most of them even now, right? You get to go live happily ever after with your mate. And the thing about it is happily ever after is not real for everybody, right? And when you're teaching children at a young age that this is how it's supposed to be, that everybody's supposed to live happily ever after, that's the expectation that they have when they go into these relationships, because they've then created this romanticized facade about a relationship rather than recognizing really what's going on. You can still be in a relationship. You can still be happy. You can get married. You can have children. You can do the things that you would like to do in those relationships. However, it's not going to be peaches and roses and all that other kind of, flowery, fancy stuff. There's work that has to go into it. And a lot of times people don't want to do the work. They just want things to be. And that's just not realistic. Anything worth having, you have to work at it to some degree. And for some relationships, you have to work harder than you do in others. That's just the nature of it, especially when you really want that relationship to happen. And when people are constantly growing and changing and evolving, right? And you're doing this while in tandem while you're in a relationship, maybe your spouse isn't growing and you are, or maybe your spouse is growing and you aren't. And maybe you guys are growing in different directions, or maybe you guys are growing better together. All of those things definitely, I think, play a part. And when you're talking about the media and how the media tries to depict relationships, it definitely creates these rose-colored glasses. And also, too, remember, for the longest, anytime you saw Black families on TV, daddy was missing, right? Or mommy was missing. It was never like I'm not going to say never, but a lot of times it's not a two-parent household. So you don't get the image of what it's supposed to look like when you're actually working at that relationship. However, you could feel however you feel about Bill Cosby, but the Bill Cosby show was a Black family where you actually saw a working wife and a working husband. They had prestigious jobs and they worked their behinds off to raise their kids. And you know what I'm saying? And they had their issues. They got mad with each other. They dealt with those issues. They worked through those problems. They had more real life circumstances with their children. You know what I'm saying? And so you got to see that depicted on television, which is more realistic than all of these single parent household TV shows. Because although there are a lot of single parent households in the United States, especially amongst Black folks, all of them ain't like that. Matter of fact, you know what I'm saying? So I think it's important to understand that there's definitely other things to look to. If you're going to look at media, remember that everything that you see on TV ain't what it is. What were you going to say, E?
Yeah, well, I definitely wanted to tag back in on that on the media topic, because not only just from the rose-colored glasses, I think I'm going to start with the modern and then I'm going to work my way back. I think also you have it also where you could have a distorted view on love in itself. And I think that kind of goes towards why a lot of those women, some women, when asked, would they rather be married? I think there was a question one time where they asked a young lady, would you rather be married and have kids or not? And the girl said, I'd rather not be married and have kids with multiple men, because I could get more child support from each man individually than I would if I ain't had one husband. And like
mentality.
You know what I'm saying? And I think
that's a mentality. Why are you out here just worried about child support as opposed to worried about having children?
Because that's a way of you finding a way of getting stability, right? Like that's a way that you feel like, okay, if I have multiple children's fathers, then I don't necessarily have to worry about, or I can get the maximum amount that I was supposed to get out of each man, as opposed to if I'm only married to one man, I'm only going to get just a certain amount. And then I'm going to also bring it back into saying, like, you know, when you look at some of our movies, when you look at what was not Big Mama's House, but Soul Food. When you look at Soul Food, when you look at how, you know, Cousin Terry slept with my girl, you know what I mean? You've seen a lot of depiction of men doing, you know, black men in particular, not holding up their part of the bargain. And so, you know, you see that all the time. I'm trying to think where what's my man name? Every time we seen Calvin Powell, Clifton Paul, and a lot of
Paul, he's out there doing some foolishness, right?
He was always on a dirtbag type of vibe, and it was just like, you know. So you will see those type of images, but I want to go back to what you said too, because while the Cosby's and, you know, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air gets a lot of credit for being an example of, you know, great black people doing great things, but like, we got to remember, and both of those shows, well, let's start with the Cosby. You had a doctor and a lawyer who were married. You know what I'm saying? And granted, we all know from being attorneys, there's a small percentage of black lawyers. And I'm almost certain it's probably a small, if not smaller percentage of black women
like
who are
doctors. Right.
So, you know what I'm saying? It's a great concept and it showed great things. And we even got a great show off of it, A Different World, which also helped people who want to go to college and things of that nature. But it was a great show, but I would almost contrast it in comparison to something I think that might be a little more relatable to more people with James and
Florida Evans in Good Time.
In Good Times, because unfortunately, while they were, because even if you was to go look at the Jeffersons, they moved on up. You know what I'm saying? And they had the white butler and everything. But let's go back to, you know what I'm saying, James in Florida. James in Florida gave you real life situations that a lot of people could watch on TV, that a lot of people could have probably seen and been like, you know what, I feel that. You know what I'm saying? Whether it wasn't your direct situation or maybe your cousin situation or something like that, you know what I'm saying? I feel that, you know, and I think that that's when you saw people working together, being a family, you know what I'm saying? Figuring it out, you know, doing what they had to do to make things happen. And you also saw, you know, what was like 3 kids that they had, you know what I'm saying? And they figured it out. I think Rock was another example of it. You had Everybody Hates Chris, which was a pretty good example as well of a black family and a father being real tight on the wallet and stuff like that, trying to make things happen. But there are some examples of it, but they don't necessarily get as much credit, and they haven't been necessarily placed within society's views a lot of times. I think on This Is Us, they did a great job of, you know, allowing the black characters in that show to also have their dynamic, you know, show how they work on their relationship and have everything going with that as well. So there are some examples in modern day as well, but it's not as likely as everything else. Malik, if you would like to join.
Oh yeah. Thanks for that, E. So one point I wanted to make before we kind of get into the wrap up here is, you know, a lot of young women want that old love that they see with their grandparents. You know, maybe some of their parents if they're older, but in the current modern society where women have more freedom of choice, they have freedom of choice, sexually freedom, you know, work, as we just talked about earlier, and they have all these options. Basically, it's 50-50, you know, that's what we hear, equality, right? Even the pay is almost equal. Everything's getting much better in terms of equality, what men can do, what women can do. But we're finding that, you know, there's issues with that, and it's not working because, you know, the men are resisting and the women are having pushback as well. and it's leading to fractured relationships in this country, and it's definitely harming the Black community. If it's harming anybody else, we always get the worst. So it's harming us as well. I think that, we need to take a look at that. Like, why is it that the women want it all, right? Without having the understanding that, look, we need to, okay, we can't have it all, but what can we compromise with? Be more compromising. What are you willing to allow or let go, right? Because you can't just have everything. Of course, you know the typical thing that's going around on YouTube: 6 feet, 6 figure, six pack, loyal, all these perfect qualities, devout, religious person, whatever. If you do follow religious or whatever, yes man, cater to you type of guy. It's like, wow, they want all the quality, some qualities in some make believe man that doesn't exist. So there's a big issue. I know that goes back to the rose colored glasses, but it also goes to what, wanting the old love in a new age, right? They want both, right? Just like, come on. There's modern men too, right? They're not going to be the same men of old, which is a good and bad thing in my opinion. But I know we're going to get more into the young men in our next segment. Do y'all guys have any comments on that?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I do have a quick comment about that. I do think that there's nothing wrong with equality. I do not think that there's anything wrong with wanting it all. I do think that there's a problem because people are not searching for balance. Because although the nature of relationships has changed, whether it be you wanting that traditional love, because there are men out there that want that traditional type of female as well, right? And they're not finding it, and I'm finding her rather. And I think a lot of it has to do with finding balance and being amenable to the fact that people grow and times have changed, right? I think that there's certain aspects from traditional type relationships that can certainly carry over to a new age relationship, but those two people need to figure out what that is for them, because I think that that's going to be different for everybody. And I think that it's okay to, be in a situation where you are learning what that is. Because kind of like you said earlier, you can't have a car without test driving it. Now, you should know what you're looking for in that car, right? You can't just be out here, ooh, a red car, and then call it a day, right? You need to know whether or not the car turns on, whether or not the friggin' battery works, whether or not it has transmission problems, or you know what I'm saying? If it has an oil leak, how good is it on gas?
Don't dirty the car before taking it off the lot.
But right, and don't tear the car up when you take it off the lot for a test drive either. Right? Don't run that car into the ground. Don't crash it. Don't tear it up. Don't do none of that. You don't need to be putting all kind of
like why is the oil low?
Sorry. Right. You don't need to be putting all kind of super miles on the car. If you know it don't take that. That's why it's called a test drive. It don't take 15 test drives to figure out whether or not you want the car. Right. So it's like, we definitely have to find that type of balance. And as far as young ladies are concerned, like, yeah, you might not know what you want, but you definitely know what you don't want, right? And it's important to not try to fix something you don't want into what you want, because it ain't gonna work. And I think that right there is one of the biggest things. I think having proper mentorship, like Ian mentioned earlier, finding different programs where girls can learn things at younger ages and listening to your elders, because even though it may seem as though they don't know what they're talking about, chances are they do. Because one of the greatest teachers in this world is experience. And a lot of times, sometimes people can come at you with bias and sound angry and bitter, and they very well may be, but you can still stand to learn something from it, regardless if you're learning to do the opposite or you're learning from that experience. But it's important to always go into circumstances with an open mind, because you never know what you can take out. So I just wanted to go ahead and say all that. I'm going to go ahead and give my final thought real quick. Because, unless you guys had any solutions that you wanted to talk about.
I mentioned mine earlier now.
I guess I'll just say mine. I think, these young women, modern women today need to submit.
See, you always want to start some stuff.
Hold on.
What does that mean?
I wasn't finished.
Okay.
Please. They need to submit to the consequences of their actions. They're trying to resist. They're trying to be unaccountable. Because there's consequences to their actions. Of course, if you do what you want, there's consequences to that. So, modern women today, you need to understand. I'm talking to you here. You need to submit to your consequences. There's consequences to your actions, and they're very dire, and it's not getting better in this world, especially in this country. The inflation is high. Prices keep going up. Jobs, wages aren't going up. So we already know women entrepreneurship is on the rise, but their salaries are still not comparable to, where it needs to be at for them to be on their own and just totally independent, right? Most women. So, especially in our community, with the average salaries that they have. So they need to, for their survival, for the best interest, it's in their best interest to submit. And that is my little soliloquy.
Anyway, let me go ahead.
I know it's controversial.
Go ahead and give
I know women won't like it, but it's just in your best interest.
Anyway, let me go ahead and give my final thought. So, Malik, you just be throwing me off. I'm not even about to address all that stuff you just got finished saying. What I will say is this. To young ladies out there, be open and find balance, right? And recognize that things are not going to be how they are on television. Things are not going to always be how you see for your parents or your grandparents or whoever. You are your own person. You are an individual, and the person that you with is their own person, and they are an individual. And you can't continue to go into circumstances expecting what you see two other individuals experience. Why? Because they're not you or that other person. Y'all are different. So your experiences are going to be different. Be open to learn and be open to grow, but always search for balance. Because the thing about searching for balance is when you find it, things are always going to be trying to move from one side to the other. But to find that balance, it's going to be easier for you to navigate through things, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting to make money. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be self-sufficient. There's nothing wrong with working towards that, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting what you want out of a man. However, those desires do have to be realistic, because a man is a man, which means he's an imperfect person. And just in being that he's imperfect, as much as we would like to believe that we are not imperfect, we are. We're human beings. We are going to make mistakes. We are going to bump our head from time to time, and that's okay. And I think it's important to remember that is okay. It's okay to be a human, and just move with wisdom. Ask yourself, when you find yourself in these situations, if your friend or your little cousin or your little sister or something like that came to you and told you what was going on in your life, what kind of advice would you give them? And if that advice is something that, like, you need to remove yourself from that situation, ask yourself why you're still standing in that same space when you wouldn't recommend anybody else to be there. So that way you can find how to navigate your way through having a successful relationship, even when you're young, right? And how to even have a successful relationship, not just with another man, but also with yourself. Because you have to be able to have a good relationship with yourself in order to have a good relationship with anybody else. And that's my final thought.
Absolutely. For me, my final thought for young women would be to be patient. I think there's two things that I would say to this point. If you're dating someone older, I would say before you date someone older, rather, know what it is that you're looking for yourself. Know what it is that you would like to have for your life so that you can at least have yourself situated in a situation. If you don't want to be patient, if you want to date somebody that's within your age group or within your, within your, your age group, be patient, because that man may not be where he is going or where he's working towards getting towards. I think within you being patient, my thing would be some factors that I think that you should look for is their commitment, that man's commitment to being better. Are they showing you on the daily that they're committed to becoming a better person each day? Are they doing certain things to improve themselves as a man? Are they consistent in certain things in their lives? There's a lot of things that I think that you can look at to weave out if certain guys aren't serious, either about you or their own life. I think that you can see those things by looking at, how they approach certain things, how they treat you, how they treat your family, how they treat others around them. You know what I'm saying? How they treat their family. These are factors that I think that you can kind of look at to gauge rather if this guy is somebody who's just talking it or are they walking it. And I think these are things that come that you can learn as time progresses. So be patient if you're dating someone at your age. My thing is, if you date somebody older, my only caution would be know yourself first, because you can get very much caught up into knowing the things that you may be wanting, but not getting what you need. And that's going to be damaging, right? Because you might get, the 3, 4, 5 gun bag. You might get the trip. You might get da-da-da-da-da. You know what I'm saying? You might get access. You might get some rent paid sometime. You know what I'm saying? But you still cutting yourself short. If I'm only being frank, you're still cutting yourself short. Get the whole fucking thing. Like, you know what I'm saying? Get written in the will. You know what I'm saying? At least get a provision made for you on a prenup if you was going to get married. Get something in your name. Like, get it. Don't get a trinket. Get it if you're going to really get it. If not, then just accept what you get and understand that it's short term and it's not long term. And you might want to find somebody that's going to be there for long term, because when you get older, you're going to want somebody that's going to have some history. And when you older, you will see a lot of women that say gentlemen who are in position are not going to necessarily be looking for you. You know what I'm saying? Per se, unless they have a certain mindset that they want a woman that's their age, that's da-da-da-da. A lot of times men that's in position might be trying to find somebody, like to Malik's point, who are a little bit more equipped to go with on their programming. So, take while you're young, while you have the time, either be patient and build with the person that's your age, or take the time to ask some women that's a little bit older what some things that they would have looked for if you're going to date somebody older, so that you can make sure that that man that you actually are dating is not just looking out for you in the short term, but he also is invested in your future for the long term, that he's also invested in you and want to see you make it. So those would be my little words of advice for any young women who's, looking to be out here in this dating game and, looking for love and looking to try to provide, hopefully have a family one day. I want to jump into also our business of the month, Black Business of the Month, which is, again, the Good Company, Good COMPENNY. And we also have, that's our Black Business of the Month. I also wanted to talk about the book of the month, which is Limitless, which also is provided by the Good Company as well. It's a bunch of different quotes and experiences that that kind of leaves, I don't want to say affirmations per se, but these are just little tidbits, little encouragements to kind of help you through certain situations and having a mindset to be great. And then lastly, I want to leave on a motivational minute of saying that, you know, I would say you can get the things that you want. You just might not get them all at the time that you want them. So that's what I want to say. When we talk about this young love situation, I think a lot of times people want the situation to be what they want. They want it to be young. You know, they want to be able to have children. They might want to travel. They might want to have multiple cars. They might want to have foreign cars even. They may want to have, you know, all of these things. But you might have to understand that in order to achieve those things, you might not get them all in that order, or you might not get them all in that moment. But if you're willing to take the time to work with the right person, or work with the right man or woman, you know, whoever you like, I think that it is possible to get it all. I just think that, you know, you just have to be willing to make the sacrifices and the things that's needed in order to achieve those things. And, you know, so I would encourage anybody, again, to take their time, to be patient, to do things for the long haul. Always put the long-term goals first, so that, you know what I'm saying, you're setting yourself up for longer success than short-term come-ups. Because as we all see, when the PUA and EDD was popping, everything was a go. You know, interest was low, everything was all good and dandy. PUA ended, EDD ended, where if you was in California, but like you said, like the extra credits ended, inflation ran up. And so you can see when it's good, it's all good. But when it's bad, you know, it can really rain on you. So that's why I say, if you shoot for the long-term goals, you know that overall, you know what I'm saying, you're going to put yourself in a better position. And sometimes that takes patience. Sometimes that takes, you know, timing. Sometimes that takes, you know, having to go through a couple different situations in order to know what it is. That may take talking to other women, like she said earlier, talking to other people to kind of learn their lessons, so you don't necessarily have to bump your head in order to get that. So that's what I want to leave you with, and leave any young lady who may hear this to be encouraged to know that, you know, you can have all of the things of your heart's desires. You just may need to wait, because God's timing is immaculate, and it will come for you when it's supposed to come. And if you're doing the things that you need to be doing in order for it to happen. So with that being said, I'll leave it to my co-hosts if they have any last little words. I'm just going to let you guys know that you can catch us live every Wednesday around 8:30-ish on Instagram. You can also catch episodes on Facebook, as well as our YouTube page, Counterpoise Podcast. I want to thank everybody, you know, for watching, the support. Also my castmates. As you know, we all make a commitment every week to be here, rain, sleet, hail, snow, wherever we're at, to kind of, you know, drop these for you guys and just give you some gems, so that you don't feel like you're alone in this world and that you have to do everything on your own.
That's right. We want to thank you all for joining us today. All of our social media tags will be to follow. And make sure you tap in with us on Wednesday at 8:30 on Instagram. Other than that, make sure you're kind to one another. And just be good to yourself too. Can't forget about being good to yourself. Other than that, we will see you next week.
All right, guys. Thank you. That's all I have on my end.